Hello everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with where you from and what time it is. That way, YouTube will keep pulling you stories like this. Now, let the shadows take over. When my sister Jenna moved in with me, I told myself it was temporary. Just a few weeks, maybe a month, until she got her life back together. I lived alone in a 2-bedroom rental outside Dayton, and I'll admit, the house always felt too quiet at night. So at first the idea of having company again didn't sound so bad, but Jenna wasn't the same person I remembered from childhood. She walked differently, talked differently, even the way she laughed. Low, deliberate, like she had to remind herself when it was the right time to do it. Sounded wrong. The first week I'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and find the hallway lights on. Her bedroom door would be cracked open, but the room behind it looked untouched. Perfectly made bed, blinds drawn, not a single thing out of place. Yet I'd hear the faint creak of the floorboards in the living room, like someone pacing back and forth heel to toe. When I'd step out and check, there'd be nothing. Just the stale, heavy silence of the house. By the second week, she started talking about things I knew never happened. At dinner one night, she asked me if I remembered the time our mother locked me in the basement for 2 days without food. I stared at her, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, and told her that never happened. She smiled, leaned forward, and said, "That's because you don't remember it." I do. I tried to laugh it off. Tried to tell myself maybe she was joking or maybe she just dreamt it. But she wouldn't let it go. Every night she'd bring up some new story. Me drowning in the bathtub when I was 6. Me sleepwalking out into the street when I was 9. Me screaming her name in the middle of the night because something was in my room. None of those things ever happened. Yet she looked me dead in the eye, like she was watching me relive them in real time. The first truly horrifying moment came on a Thursday. I was in the shower when I heard the bathroom door creak open. Steam fogged the mirror, but I swore I saw a figure standing just inside the doorway. I called out, "Jenna?" But no answer came. Just silence, thick and heavy, before the door clicked shut again. When I pulled the curtain back, the room was empty. But the mirror had words written across it. Not with lipstick, not with soap. Scratched into the glass itself. Deep, jagged letters that read, "She's awake. Don't open your eyes tonight." I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The mirror had been fine that morning. No cracks, no marks. I ran straight to Jenna's room, but she was sitting on the floor with her back to me, rocking slowly, whispering. When I demanded to know what she did to the mirror, she turned her head just enough for me to see her smile, and she whispered, "I didn't write it. You did." That night I couldn't bring myself to sleep. Every creak, every settling groan of the house made my skin crawl. Around 2 a.m. I finally shut my eyes. And that's when I heard it, a voice, my own voice, coming from the hallway. Soft, broken, whispering my name. I shot up in bed, heart hammering, and stared at the door. The shadow under the crack showed bare feet standing there, but when I yanked it open, the hallway was empty. I told myself I was losing it, that it was the lack of sleep, the stress. But then I looked down. The hardwood floor outside my room was covered in wet footprints, small ones, the exact size of my own. I followed them down the hallway, past Jenna's room. Her door was wide open, she wasn't inside. The footprints led straight into the bathroom where the mirror, now cracked completely through the middle, reflected something that made me stagger back. It wasn't me staring back in the reflection. It was her, Jenna. But she was standing exactly where I was, mirroring my every move. And as I froze there, not breathing, the reflection raised one hand and traced my name across the broken glass in blood-red letters. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat on the edge of my bed with every light on, staring at the door, half expecting Jenna to walk in, half expecting something else. The reflection in the mirror kept replaying in my head, the way it looked at me, the way it wrote my name with a smile that wasn't mine. By morning, Jenna was back in her room. Her bed perfectly made, her closet shut, blinds drawn. She acted like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't spent half the night haunting my hallway. When I asked her why she wasn't in her bed, she tilted her head and said, "Because you were in there instead." That's when it hit me. She wasn't just telling lies. She was trying to rewrite my memories. And the worst part? A small, traitorous part of me was starting to wonder if maybe she was right. Over the next few days, the house itself felt wrong. I'd set my keys on the kitchen counter, and when I came back, they'd be on the coffee table. I'd lock the front door, but an hour later it would be unlocked again. My phone alarm would go off in the middle of the night, set for times I hadn't programmed. Every time something happened, Jenna was nearby watching. Not angry, not smirking, just watching, like she was studying my reaction. One night I heard movement in the spare bedroom. That was her room technically, but she was supposed to be sleeping in mine. The floorboards groaned like someone pacing back and forth. My chest tightened as I pushed the door open. The room was pitch black, but I could see the faint outline of a figure moving near the window. I flipped the light on. The room was empty, bed made, blinds shut, air still. But the carpet was crushed down in the shape of footprints, fresh ones, leading right past me into the hallway. I spun around and nearly screamed. Jenna was standing inches away, blocking the doorway. Her hair was tangled, her eyes wide, unblinking. She leaned close enough that I could feel her breath on my cheek and whispered, "Stop walking in my room when I'm not here." I shoved past her and locked myself in my bedroom. I knew I couldn't take much more of this. I started looking for new apartments the next morning, but before I could even finish one listing, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. It was a photo of me, sitting at the kitchen table. Except I wasn't sitting there. I was in my bedroom with the door locked. That's when I realized it. There weren't two of us in this house. There were three. Me, Jenna, and something else that looked like us both. The next night broke me. I woke up to the sound of someone whispering directly into my ear. I bolted upright, but the room was empty. My skin crawled as I realized the whisper had been my own voice, repeating a phrase over and over. "She's awake, she's awake, she's awake." I staggered into the bathroom, desperate to splash cold water on my face. But when I looked into the mirror, it wasn't me staring back. It wasn't Jenna either. It was a face caught halfway between the two of us, eyes too wide, jaw hanging loose, skin pale and stretched thin. The thing in the mirror leaned forward and whispered, "One of us has to go." And that's when the bathroom light flickered out. I ran, tripping over myself as I bolted for the front door. I yanked it open, but Jenna was already standing on the porch, blocking the way. Her face was calm, her smile slow and deliberate. She tilted her head and said, "You finally saw her." Behind me, from inside the house, I heard footsteps running toward us. 2 sets, heavy, fast. I didn't wait to see who or what they belonged to. I shoved past Jenna and sprinted into the night, barefoot, heart hammering. I didn't stop until I reached the 24-hour gas station down the street, where the cashier stared at me like I'd lost my mind. I told myself I'd go back with the police, that I'd get answers. But I never did. I never set foot in that house again. And sometimes late at night I still get text messages, photos of me, sitting alone in rooms I haven't been in for years, always with the same caption, "She's awake." When my sister Emily inherited our grandmother's farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, I thought she'd finally caught a break. The place was old, falling apart in spots, but still solid. Big wraparound porch, creaky oak floors, a wide backyard with cornfields stretching out like an ocean. The kind of property people in cities would kill for. But Emily didn't move into the farmhouse the way normal people would. She didn't bring furniture, didn't decorate. She didn't even set up electricity in half the rooms. She dragged her sleeping bag into the master bedroom and lit the place with candles, like she was reenacting the 1800s. When I asked her why, she just smiled faintly and said, "Because the house doesn't like the lights." I laughed it off, but deep down I remembered something. Grandma never used the upstairs much in her later years. She'd lived almost entirely out of the kitchen, her recliner, and the little bathroom downstairs. Whenever I asked why she never went upstairs, she'd mutter, "That part of the house isn't mine anymore." The first night I stayed to help Emily unpack, I woke around 3 a.m. to the sound of humming. It was low, tuneless, and it came from under the floor. At first I thought I was dreaming, but when I sat up, the humming stopped instantly, like it had been waiting for me to notice. The next morning I asked Emily if she'd been awake. She looked at me strangely, then said, "I don't sing when I'm alone." She does. I brushed it off, but as the days went on, I started noticing the doors. Every single door in the house, bedrooms, closets, even the pantry, had heavy brass bolts drilled into them. Not on the outside, on the inside, as though every person who had lived there wanted a way to lock themselves in. All except for one, the basement door. That one had no lock at all. Just a handle, polished smooth like it had been used thousands of times. One afternoon, while clearing out old junk from the shed, I found a shoebox half buried near the basement window. Inside were photographs of me. Some were family snapshots from years ago, but others looked like they had been taken while I was sleeping. My face was always scratched out, black ink gouging deep into the paper. I stormed inside shaking and confronted Emily. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look embarrassed. She just tilted her head and said, "I need to make sure you stay. If you keep leaving, she gets angry." I asked her who she was. Emily didn't answer. She just turned, walked down into the basement, and closed the door behind her. That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps creaking through the house. Slow, deliberate steps circling the downstairs. I sat up in bed, listening as they moved to the base of the stairs. Then silence. I held my breath, heart pounding, waiting for them to retreat. But instead, I heard something worse. Scratching. Long fingernails dragging up the banister, step by step, until they reached the top. I shot out of bed and opened my door. The hallway was empty. But when I looked down at the banister, there were fresh grooves carved into the wood. By morning, Emily acted like nothing had happened. She sat at the kitchen table sipping tea, her hair flat and her eyes bloodshot like she hadn't slept a wink. I tried to bring up the scratches, but she only smiled. "She was just reminding you. You belong here." I decided I was done. That evening, I packed a bag and headed for the front door. But when I grabbed the knob, it wouldn't turn. The lock was gone. Literally gone. The hardware plate missing. Screws dangling like someone had yanked it out during the night. I tried the windows. Every single one was nailed shut. Even the glass panes in the kitchen had been painted over from the outside. Panic rose in my chest as I checked the back door. Same thing. No lock. Just bare wood where the mechanism had been. And then I heard her voice, calm, almost casual, drifting up from the basement stairwell. "You're not supposed to leave after dark. It's her rule." I turned slowly. Emily was standing at the bottom of the stairs, holding a single candle. Her face was half in shadow, eyes glinting like wet stones. The flame threw her shadow long across the wall, crooked and twitching like something with too many limbs. "I set everything up for us," she whispered. "It's time to finish what she started." Before I could move, she blew the candle out. The hallway collapsed into blackness. I heard her bare feet thudding against the steps, rushing upward fast. I bolted for the bedroom, slammed the door, and pushed my dresser against it. My hands were shaking, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. And in that dark, suffocating silence, I heard her nails scratching on the wood of the door. Not pounding, not kicking, scratching. Slow, steady, deliberate. And then, in the quietest voice imaginable, Emily whispered through the crack, "You were supposed to sleep downstairs tonight." I didn't sleep. I sat against the bedroom wall with the dresser shoved against the door, every muscle locked tight, waiting for her to stop scratching. At some point near dawn, the sound finally ceased. I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, sunlight was slipping through the cracks in the curtains. I pushed the dresser back carefully, half expecting Emily to be waiting for me in the hall. But when I opened the door, the upstairs was silent. Too silent. Her room was empty, her sleeping bag neatly folded. For a second, I thought maybe she had gone outside. But then I noticed something. Every single door upstairs, my room, the closets, the bathroom, had fresh locks bolted on from the outside. While I had been sleeping, someone had screwed heavy latches into the wood one by one. My stomach dropped as I realized the only door without a lock was the basement. The smell hit me before I reached it. Damp concrete mixed with something sharp and metallic. I forced myself to open the basement door and a draft of air rushed past me, colder than the rest of the house. The wooden stairs groaned as I descended, and halfway down, I saw the light. Candles, dozens of them, lining the basement floor in a rough circle. And Emily, kneeling in the center, humming that same low tune I'd heard my first night. Her arms were smeared with something dark, and in front of her lay a long wooden box. An old coffin, its lid cracked and warped from years of dampness. My chest tightened. "Emily, what the hell is this?" She looked up at me, eyes hollow, mouth curled in that faint smile. "She's still here. Grandma kept her locked away, but I let her out." I backed toward the stairs, but she shot to her feet, knocking over a candle. "Don't you dare leave," she hissed. Her voice was sharp now, nothing like the flat calm she'd had before. "She chose us. She wants us to stay together. If you walk out, you'll tear the family apart." My legs shook as I scrambled backward up the steps, but before I could reach the top, the basement door slammed shut on its own. The sound echoed through the house, and the lock clicked. I was trapped inside with her. Emily started opening the coffin. The lid creaked, and the smell that poured out made me gag. But it wasn't bones inside. It was objects. Dolls with their eyes torn out. Bundles of hair tied with twine. Photographs of our family. Every face scratched out except hers. She lifted one of the dolls and held it close. "I've been feeding her. That's why she lets me stay." My throat went dry. Feeding her what? Emily turned her head slowly, smiling in that broken, deliberate way. Then she pointed to the wall. I hadn't noticed it before. In the far corner of the basement, chained to the concrete, were marks, long, deep scratches gouged into the wall like fingernails dragged across it for years. And just below them, something else. Stains. Brown, flaking stains that had seeped into the stone. "She doesn't like it when people leave," Emily whispered. "That's why Grandma stayed downstairs for years. That's why I called you here, so I wouldn't be alone when she comes back." Suddenly, every candle in the basement flickered at once. The air shifted, heavy, suffocating. My ears popped like the pressure had changed. And then I heard it. Another voice. Not Emily's. Low, guttural, vibrating through the floorboards. It said my name. I bolted for the door, slamming my fists against it until my hands bled. Emily shrieked behind me, her voice cracking with something inhuman. "She chose you! She chose you!" The lock finally gave, and I stumbled into the hallway, sprinting for the front door. But when I reached it, the knob twisted in my hand. The hardware was back, perfectly intact, like it had never been removed. I yanked it open and ran barefoot across the yard until the farmhouse was nothing but a speck in the distance. I never went back. I didn't answer Emily's calls. Eventually, she stopped leaving voicemails, but sometimes in the middle of the night, I get texts from unknown numbers. Photos of that basement. Photos of the coffin. And the last one I received, just last week, Wasn't a photo at all. It was a video. 30 seconds of darkness. 30 seconds of breathing. And then, right at the end, Emily's voice whispering, "She says you're next." When my sister Chloe called me out of the blue asking to crash at my place in Chicago, I hesitated. We hadn't spoken much since high school. She'd always been the overbearing type, the kind of sister who'd dig through your phone when you weren't looking or memorize your passwords just in case. But she sounded desperate, so I said yes. I live in a mid-rise apartment building near Lakeview. Nothing fancy, but decent enough. Secure entry, small balcony, neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. Chloe showed up with just one suitcase and a laptop bag. She gave me a hug that felt stiff, rehearsed, and said, "It's so good to be close to you again." At first, things seemed normal. She offered to cook, helped me clean, even reorganize the cabinets. But I noticed weird little things, like my phone charger missing from my nightstand and reappearing plugged into her room, or my laptop left open on the kitchen counter, a program running that I hadn't started. One night I got home from work and found her sitting cross-legged on the couch, watching my old home videos. Not hers, not family ones, mine. Videos I'd shot with friends on my phone, years back. Stuff I hadn't uploaded anywhere. I asked her how she got them and she just smiled and said, "You left them unlocked. You should be more careful." I brushed it off, but a pit formed in my stomach. By the second week, my phone started glitching. Alarms going off at 3:15 a.m. sharp. Random texts sent from my number to people I hadn't spoken to in years. One night, I woke up to the faint buzz of my own voice echoing through the apartment. I followed the sound to the living room and realized Chloe had set up a Bluetooth speaker. On loop, it was playing a recording of me sleeping, breathing, shifting, whispering. I confronted her, furious. She didn't even flinch. She just said, "I like listening. It makes me feel closer to you." After that, I started noticing cameras. Tiny black dots tucked into corners. One in the kitchen vent, one on the bookshelf, another near the balcony door. I yanked one out and stormed into her room, demanding answers. Her walls were covered in sticky notes, dates, times, scribbled notes about me. What I ate, when I showered, what shows I watched. My conversations on the phone written down word for word. Chloe didn't deny it. She just looked up from her laptop and said, "You have no idea how many people care about you now. They're always watching." I froze. "What do you mean, they?" She turned her screen toward me. It was a live stream. My bedroom. Right there, my bed on display to a scrolling chat window full of strangers typing things like, "He's waking up," and "Ask her to move the camera closer." My chest seized. "You're streaming me?" I shouted. Her smile stretched unnaturally wide. "Not just streaming. They love us. They want to see what happens next." I yanked the plug out of her laptop and slammed her door shut behind me, hands shaking. I locked myself in my room, checked every corner for hidden cameras, and barely slept a wink. But when I woke up the next morning, I found something taped to my mirror. A photo. Of me, asleep in bed. A photo taken from just inches above my face. I didn't go to work that day. I couldn't. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that photo taped to my mirror. The angle too close, too deliberate. Chloe had been in my room while I was sleeping, inches from my face, snapping photos while strangers watched. I decided I was done. She had to leave. No excuses. But when I knocked on her door, her room was empty. The bed was perfectly made. The suitcase she'd brought was gone. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd left on her own. Relief washed over me, until I heard a faint sound coming from the living room. Laughter. Not Chloe's. Not exactly. It was hundreds of voices, overlapping, distorted, all bleeding out from her laptop. I crept closer and saw the screen. The live stream was still going, not from her camera this time, but from all of them. Every hidden camera I hadn't found yet. Every angle of my apartment lit up on screen, switching views like a sick reality show. The chat was going insane. Lines of text flying past too fast to read, but I caught fragments. Don't let him leave. She's behind you. Closer. Closer. I spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. That night, I couldn't stay still. I tore through every inch of the apartment, ripping apart vents, pulling down light fixtures, yanking cords out of the wall. And still, I couldn't find them all. Every time I thought I'd won, a faint red light would blink from another corner. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification. I opened it and froze. It was a text from an unknown number, a live stream link. Against every instinct, I tapped it. It wasn't the cameras this time. It was Chloe. She was in the hallway outside my apartment, staring straight into her phone, whispering to the audience, "He doesn't trust me anymore. Should I go inside?" The chat exploded with yes messages, hundreds of them. My blood went cold. I ran to the door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. No footsteps, no breathing. Slowly, I unlatched the chain and cracked it open. The hallway was empty, but taped to the outside of my door was another photo. Not of me, of Chloe. Smiling wide, her eyes glinting, standing over me as I slept. I slammed the door shut, panic clawing at my chest. I called the building security, begged them to check the hallway cameras. When they called me back 20 minutes later, their answer made my skin crawl. "There's no one on the footage. Not your sister. Not anyone." That's when I realized the truth. Chloe wasn't just filming me. She wasn't just streaming me. She was editing reality itself for them, for her audience. The final night I spent in that apartment, I woke to the sound of clapping. Slow, deliberate claps echoing from the living room. I crept out, heart in my throat, and found Chloe sitting on the couch, laptop open, thousands of faces glowing on the screen. She didn't even look at me. She just whispered, "They're ready for the finale." Then she turned the laptop around, and there I was, not standing in the room, not looking at the screen, but tied to a chair in the corner, eyes wide, mouth gagged, struggling. I staggered back, gasping, but the chair in the corner was empty. Nothing there. When I looked again, Chloe was gone too. The laptop sat open, streaming to a faceless crowd that was still typing, still laughing, still begging for more. I left that night with nothing but the clothes on my back. I never saw Chloe again. But sometimes when I scroll through random forums or back corners of the internet, I see clips, grainy footage of me in that apartment, sleeping, eating, staring into the mirror. And every single time, the caption is the same. Live with sister. Episode ongoing. When my sister Hannah suggested we drive cross-country together, I almost laughed. We hadn't been close in years, and she'd never been the let's bond type. But she insisted, said she was moving to New Mexico for a new start, and wanted me along for company. Against my better judgment, I said yes. The first day was fine. We sang along to old songs on the radio, swapped stories about high school, even joked about our parents. For the first time in years, she almost felt like a sister again. But by the second day, cracks started to show. At a gas station outside Des Moines, I realized my wallet was missing. I tore the car apart, checked every pocket, but it was gone. Hannah just smiled and said, "Relax, I'll cover us." She said it so calmly, like she'd been waiting for this moment. I felt my stomach sink, but I didn't press. That night, at a cheap roadside motel, I woke around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. Hannah's bed was empty. I peeked outside and froze. She was standing in the parking lot, leaning against another car, talking to a man I didn't recognize. He looked nervous, kept glancing around like he didn't want to be seen. She touched his arm, laughed at something he said, then glanced back toward our room. I ducked away before she caught me. By morning, the man was gone. His car sat abandoned on the highway shoulder, Driver's door wide open, luggage spilled into the grass. Hannah didn't slow when we passed it. She just said, "Some people can't handle long trips." Her voice was flat, almost rehearsed. The third day got worse. At breakfast, I tried calling a friend just to hear another voice, but my phone was dead. When I plugged it into the charger, nothing happened. Hannah reached across the table, plucked it from my hands, and slipped it into her bag. "No need for distractions," she said. "Just focus on the road." Every choice was hers. She picked the diners, the motels, the back roads. The more I noticed, the clearer it became that I wasn't traveling with her. I was being escorted. That night, we checked into another nameless motel. The clerk barely looked at us, just slid a key across the counter. Hannah took it before I could reach. Inside the room, she insisted I take the bed while she unrolled a blanket on the floor. I pretended to sleep, but hours later I heard movement. When I cracked my eyes open, she was kneeling by my backpack, carefully pulling things out. Clothes, chargers, my journal. She stacked them neatly, then carried them to the bathroom and came back empty-handed. The next morning, my backpack held nothing but shirts. Everything else was gone. When I demanded to know where my stuff was, she looked at me with that same faint smile. "We don't need extra weight. Besides, you have me. What else do you need?" By day 4, I wasn't sure if we were headed west anymore. The road signs were rusted, faded, some too weathered to read. Hannah never let me drive, never let me see the map. When I asked where we were, she said, "Don't worry, we're almost there." That evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, she turned off the highway onto a gravel road. We drove for miles into empty fields until a dark shape appeared ahead. A barn. She parked, killed the engine, and turned to me. Her smile hadn't faded once the entire trip. "We'll rest here tonight," she said. The air inside the barn was thick with the smell of rust and mildew. Chains hung from beams overhead, and in the far corner, barely visible in the shadows, were 2 people. Strangers. Bound. Gagged. Their eyes locked on mine, wide and pleading. I stumbled back, my throat closing. "What the hell is this?" Hannah shut the barn doors behind us and slid the lock into place. Her smile widened just slightly. "This," she said calmly, "is the part I couldn't tell you about." My first instinct was to run. I backed toward the doors, but Hannah was already standing in front of them, keys dangling from her fingers. She slid them into her pocket and looked at me the way someone looks at a dog trying to bolt from its leash. "You were supposed to trust me," she said, "but you always ruin things." The captives whimpered, muffled behind their gags. Their clothes were filthy, their wrists rubbed raw from rope burns. My pulse hammered so hard it hurt. "Who are they?" I demanded. Hannah tilted her head, calm as ever. "Passengers, same as you." I lunged for the chains hanging from the rafters, hoping I could swing one at her, but she moved faster. Her hand clamped onto my arm with a strength I didn't know she had. She shoved me back against the wall so hard my teeth rattled. "You're not leaving," she said flatly. "Not until you understand." In the corner, I spotted my backpack. I scrambled for it, ripped it open, and my stomach dropped. IDs. Dozens of them. Driver's licenses, student cards, passports. None of them mine. None of them Hannah's. Strangers. Faces of people who hadn't made it out. I gagged, bile rising in my throat. "What did you do?" Hannah crouched in front of me, her expression unreadable. "Every mile has a cost. Gas, food, time, people. You can't drive forever without paying. I just figured out a better way." The barn air felt heavier, closing in. The captives shifted, eyes wild, their muffled cries cutting through the silence. Hannah stood, paced in front of them like a teacher giving a lesson. "Do you know how many times I've done this?" she asked, her voice steady. 12. 13. I lost count, but no one ever finds them. The road swallows them up. She walked back to me, leaned down, and placed something cold in my hand. A rope. "It's your turn now," she said. Tie one of them up tighter, or sit in the chair yourself. But someone's not leaving this barn. My hands shook violently. You're insane. She smiled. No, I'm efficient. I dropped the rope and bolted for the doors, slamming my shoulder into them again and again. The lock didn't budge. Behind me, Hannah laughed. Not loud, not manic, just a steady, almost gentle laugh that told me she wasn't worried. I turned back and saw her standing between me and the others, her shadow stretched long by the dim light of the single hanging bulb. She wasn't holding a weapon. She didn't need one. The barn itself was her weapon. The chains, the ropes, the miles of empty fields outside. The two captives began thrashing wildly, their muffled screams desperate as if they knew what was coming. Hannah turned toward them, then back to me. Family doesn't leave, she said softly. And now, neither will you. The bulb overhead flickered once, then burned out, plunging us into black. Somewhere in that suffocating dark, I heard the sound of metal scraping against wood, ropes tightening, and the wet thud of something heavy hitting the ground. By the time I staggered awake, the barn was empty. The captives were gone. So was Hannah. Only my backpack remained in the dirt, and inside it a fresh driver's license. Mine. The photo had been altered, the name scratched out. Across the bottom, written in thick black marker, was a single word: passenger. The first thing I noticed about Haven was the silence. Not peaceful silence, dead silence. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of gravel under my boots as I stepped out of the van. Claire was already ahead of me, waving to the people on the porch of the lodge like she belonged here. I hadn't agreed to this trip. She ambushed me. One night I was at her apartment for dinner. The next I was shoved into a van with a bag I didn't pack and told, "Trust me, this will change your life." By the time I realized where we were headed, the road signs were gone and the cell service had vanished. The staff greeted her warmly, by name, hugging her like family. When they looked at me, though, their smiles faltered. One of them, a tall man with pale eyes, grabbed my duffel without asking and said, "You won't need much here." Inside, the lodge smelled of cedar layered over something sour, like rotting fruit. Long tables stretched across the hall, set with identical bowls of a gray porridge-like stew. The walls were covered with hand-painted slogans: "Shed what hurts. Belong completely. The path is her." I leaned toward Claire. "The path is who?" She only smirked. "You'll understand." That first night they gathered us, maybe 20 people, around a bonfire behind the lodge. The staff chanted in rhythm, their voices sharp, mechanical. Claire wasn't standing with me. She was across the fire, her head tipped back, her voice louder than all the rest. She wasn't new here. She wasn't visiting. She was leading. When the chanting stopped, the tall man put a hand on my shoulder and pushed me forward. Claire's eyes glittered in the firelight. "Tonight," she announced, "we welcome my brother." Everyone clapped once, perfectly in unison. The sound was so sharp it made me flinch. I muttered, "What the hell is this, Claire?" She didn't blink. "It's not a retreat. It's a family. And you belong to me." The next morning, a bell woke us at dawn. No alarm clocks, no phones. Just that harsh metal clang echoing through the halls. Everyone shuffled into the dining hall where the gray stew from the night before was waiting. No options. No coffee, not even water. I pushed mine away after a few bites. Claire leaned close and whispered, "Eat it. They're watching." She wasn't wrong. Staff members circled the room, eyes sweeping across the tables, waiting for someone to break the rules. After breakfast, we were marched outside for reflection time. They separated us into pairs. I expected Claire would stick with me, but instead she walked off with 2 staff members, laughing with them like they were old friends. I was left with a woman named Julia. She looked hollow, her skin pale, her hands trembling. When I asked how long she'd been here, she flinched like I'd said something dangerous. Then she just muttered, "Long enough?" and walked ahead in silence. That night, when I tried to explore, I found every exit door locked. Not just the main lodge door. Even side hallways leading to stairwells were bolted shut. Windows wouldn't open more than an inch. I went to Claire's room and demanded answers. She sat calmly on her bed, folding a plain white robe. "You don't get it yet," she said. "You're safe here. Everything out there was chaos. Here, I can keep you." Her words rattled me more than the locks. She wasn't trying to comfort me. She was claiming me. On the third day, they staged a cleansing ritual in the hall. We stood in a circle, bowls of the gray stew in hand. The head staff member walked slowly behind us, tapping shoulders at random. When he reached Julia, the trembling woman from earlier, she dropped her bowl in panic. The silence that followed was unbearable. Two staff members stepped forward, grabbed her arms, and dragged her out of the circle. She screamed, pleaded, kicked against the floorboards, but no one moved to help. Not even me. I was frozen, bowl clutched in my hands, heart pounding. Claire watched me the whole time, her eyes locked on mine, smiling faintly as Julia's screams echoed down the hall until they vanished completely. Then the leader said, "Spilled food means rejection. Rejection means removal." Everyone nodded in perfect rhythm. Everyone except me. I stared at Claire, trying to read her face. She didn't look horrified. She didn't look guilty. She looked proud. And that's when it hit me. She hadn't brought me here to heal. She'd brought me here to break me. Julia never came back. No one mentioned her name the next morning. Her bed was stripped, her clothes gone, as if she had never existed. At breakfast, the same gray stew waited for us. The staff circled again, watching every bite. I noticed something in the bowls that made my stomach flip. A sliver of fabric, pale blue. Julia's sweater had been that exact color. When I looked up at Claire, she was already staring at me, smiling faintly, as if daring me to say something. I pushed the bowl away. A staff member appeared instantly at my side, hand firm on my shoulder. Claire raised a finger, dismissing him like a guard dog. "Not yet," she said. After the meal, they announced trust exercises by the river. We were led in groups of 4 down a narrow path through the pines. The air was sharp and thin, the water rushing cold and fast beside us. Each group was ordered to stand on the slick rocks and lean back, supported only by the others holding their arms. If anyone faltered, the current would take them. When it was my turn, Claire insisted on being behind me. Her grip on my wrists was like iron. "Do you trust me?" she asked loudly, so the others could hear. I wanted to scream no, but with the river roaring below, with the staff watching, I just nodded. She leaned close to my ear, her breath steady. Then fall. I let my body tip back, praying the others would hold me. For a split second, her grip loosened. My stomach dropped, the river rushing up. Then she yanked me back hard at the last moment. The group laughed in relief. Claire's smile didn't falter. She'd wanted me to feel the edge of death. That night, I tried again to leave. The main doors were still locked, but I found a narrow hallway that led to the kitchen. In the back, crates of food lined the walls, all the same bland ingredients, all unlabeled. And tucked behind them, stacked in neat rows, were shoes, pairs of them. Men's, women's, children's, some caked in mud, some still damp. I was still staring when the tall staff member appeared in the doorway. His pale eyes glowed faintly in the emergency light. "Curiosity means doubt," he said calmly. "And doubt means removal." He stepped toward me, but before he could grab me, Claire's voice cut through the air. "He's mine." The man froze, then backed away without another word. Claire led me out by the arm like a child. "You never learn," she said. "But that's why you're here. Haven isn't about choice. It's about surrender." On the final night, they held the binding ceremony. Everyone wore white robes, faces lit by torches. I was pushed into the center of the circle, my arms bound with rope. Claire stood opposite me, her robe cleaner, brighter than the rest. She raised her hands, and the chanting began. The words didn't matter. The rhythm did. Sharp, unbroken, echoing through the trees. 2 staff members dragged out another figure, hooded and stumbling. They forced them to their knees beside me. When the hood was yanked off, I nearly collapsed. It was Julia, or what was left of her. Her eyes were vacant, her skin pale, her lips cracked. She opened her mouth like she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Claire turned to me. "Every family needs a choice," she said. "Yours is simple. Take her place, or watch her vanish forever." The rope bit into my wrists, my throat locked. Julia stared at me, tears streaking her hollow cheeks. The chanting grew louder, vibrating in my chest. The staff closed in. Claire's smile widened. And in that moment, I realized there was no choice. Not really. I was already part of Haven. The last thing I saw before the torches were snuffed was my sister's face, calm, radiant, triumphant, as if this was what she had planned all along. I hadn't stepped foot in my childhood home in over a decade. After our parents died, I moved out as fast as I could. The old farmhouse held too many memories I didn't want to touch, and I figured my sister Marlene would eventually sell it. But she never did. She stayed. And when she called saying she wanted me to visit, I almost said no. Almost. The drive out felt strange. The road I remembered as cracked and bumpy was freshly paved. The mailbox was new, the lawn freshly cut, the flower beds lined with perfect rows of white stones. It was as if Marlene had been preparing for me. When I parked, she was already waiting at the door. Same figure, same smile, but there was something off in her eyes. She hugged me tight and whispered, "Welcome home." It didn't sound like a greeting. It sounded like a sentence. Inside, the house looked frozen in time. The same lemon cleaner smell, the same photos on the walls, even the same rug in the hallway. I felt like I'd stepped into the past. Marlene led me upstairs, straight to the room at the end of the hall. She opened the door slowly, almost reverently, and flicked on the light. It was the nursery, not dusty or half-empty, perfectly restored. The crib gleamed like new wood. The faded wallpaper of cartoon bears had been repainted in bright colors. Toys I hadn't seen since I was a toddler sat neatly arranged on shelves. A rocking horse gleamed in the corner. Even the mobile above the crib spun slowly, as if someone had just tapped it. I laughed nervously. "Marlene, this is creepy." She didn't laugh. She stroked the crib rails like they were priceless and whispered, "You've always belonged in here, Lawson." Hearing my own name in that tone made me shiver. That night I went to the guest room, wanting to avoid her weird nostalgia trip. But when I opened the door, the bed was gone. Nothing but bare floorboards where it had been. I turned back into the hall and found Marlene standing there, holding folded pajamas. Blue, patterned with cartoon ducks. "You'll be more comfortable in the nursery," she said, smiling like a mother coaxing her child. I told her no, but when I checked the other rooms, every single one had been stripped bare. Only the nursery had a bed, a thin mattress on the floor, so that's where I ended up. Around midnight, I woke to a creak. At first, I thought it was the house settling. Then I realized it was rhythmic. Back and forth, back and forth. The rocking horse. I sat up. In the glow spilling from the hall, I saw Marlene sitting on it, rocking slowly, smiling faintly. "You were never supposed to grow up," she whispered. The next morning, she made pancakes. But when she set my place, it wasn't a plate. It was a tray, a plastic fork, a sippy cup filled with orange juice. I shoved it away. Marlene cut the crap. Her smile didn't fade. Her voice, though, sharpened. Babies don't get choices. After breakfast, I tried every exit. The front door, the back, the garage, even the windows. All bolted from the inside, locked tight. When I turned around, Marlene was standing in the hall holding a baby monitor. She flicked it on, and my voice from last night echoed back. She'd planted one in the nursery. "Why would you do this?" I demanded. Her grin widened. "So I can hear you when you cry. You've forgotten how, but I'll help you remember." By the second night, I was desperate. I tore through my bag for my phone, but it was gone. In its place sat a plastic toy phone with bright buttons and a fake smiling face. I hurled it across the room. That was when the door opened. Slowly, quietly, Marlene stepped inside, holding a baby bottle filled with warm milk. She closed the door, slid the lock, and sat cross-legged on the floor beside me. "You'll sleep like a baby again," she said softly. "I'll make sure of it." The bottle touched my lips before I could move. The bottle pressed to my lips tasted warm and sour. I twisted my head away, gagging, but Marlene only laughed softly. She set the bottle on the floor and stroked my hair like I was a child who had thrown a tantrum. "You'll get used to it," she said. "All babies fight at first." I sat up fast, shaking, ready to fight back. But when I looked around the room, my stomach dropped. Overnight, she'd changed it. The mattress was gone. In its place, the crib had been rebuilt with reinforced wooden sides tall enough to keep me inside. The toys had been rearranged, lined along the bars like silent witnesses. Even the curtains were new, pale yellow, embroidered with balloons. She'd been busy while I slept. When I tried to stand, my knees buckled. My bag was gone. My shoes gone. Even my belt gone. Marlene smiled at me from the doorway, jingling the keys in her hand. "Nothing sharp," she said. "Nothing dangerous." That morning she sat me at the kitchen table, except it wasn't the table anymore. She'd dragged in a high chair. I barely fit, but she strapped me in anyway. The buckles dug into my chest as she spooned oatmeal into my mouth. When I spat it back out, she scooped it up with the same spoon and tried again. "Good boy," she cooed, wiping my chin. "You'll remember how to behave." I screamed at her, begged her to stop, but the walls ate my words. No neighbors, no one to hear. By the third day, I tried breaking out. I shoved the crib against the wall, climbed the rails, scraped my knees raw trying to crawl through the tiny window. But when I finally pried it open, a chain snapped tight. She'd bolted it shut from outside. Marlene appeared in the doorway holding the baby monitor like it was a trophy. "I told you I'd hear you cry," she said. "You sound just like you used to." That night, she dressed me in the duck print pajamas again. I fought her, but she was stronger than I remembered. She tied the sleeves in knots behind my back until I couldn't move my arms. Then she laid me in the crib, tucking the blanket tight around me. "Sleep now, Lawson," she whispered, rocking the crib slowly. "Tomorrow we'll try your first steps again." Her words sent a chill through me. I don't know how long I lasted. Days blurred, meals of mush and bottles, locked doors, rocking horse creaks at night. My protests grew weaker. My voice cracked. My body ached from the crib. One morning I woke to find a mirror propped against the crib. My reflection stared back, hair messy, face pale, duck print pajamas clinging to me like a costume I couldn't escape. Behind me, Marlene smiled in the mirror's glass, her hands resting on the rails. "You see it now, don't you?" she said. "You're better this way. No stress, no failures, just my baby brother forever." Tears burned my eyes. "You can't keep me like this," I whispered. Her expression softened, almost tender. "I already have." The last clear thing I remember is the sound of her humming, the same lullaby Mom used to sing, as she lowered the bottle into my hands. My fingers shook, too weak to throw it away. And as the warm milk touched my lips, I realized what terrified me most. Not that I might die here, but that part of me already wanted to give in. The last thing I remember was standing in line at the grocery store, debating whether I had enough cash for coffee beans. My vision swam, my knees buckled, and then everything went white. When I came to, I was lying in a hospital bed. Fluorescent lights buzzed above me. An IV line tugged at my arm. For a second, I felt relief. Someone had helped me. Then I turned my head. She was there. My sister Lorraine sat perfectly still in the corner chair, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. She smiled at me like she'd been waiting. "You fainted, Curtis," she said softly. "But don't worry. You're safe now." My throat was dry. I pushed myself upright, and that's when I saw the band around my wrist. A white plastic bracelet with my name, a barcode, and below it in bold letters, Guardian, Lorraine Hart. "What the hell is this?" I croaked. Lorraine stood, smoothing her skirt. "They needed someone to authorize your care. You weren't in any shape to speak for yourself." I yanked at the IV, heart racing. "I don't need a guardian. Take this off." The door opened before she could answer. A nurse stepped in, glancing first at Lorraine, not at me. "How's he doing today?" Lorraine smiled politely. "He's still confused, but he'll settle once the medication evens out." I froze. "I'm not confused." The nurse placed a pill cup in my hand, calm but firm. "This will help you relax." I tried to hand it back. "I don't want—" "Curtis," Lorraine said sharply. One word, like a command. The nurse just nodded at her and waited. My skin prickled. Nobody in that room was listening to me, only her. The day dragged like a nightmare. Every time I asked questions, what happened, how long had I been here? Lorraine answered for me. The staff scribbled on charts, nodded at her words, never mine. When I asked for my phone, the nurse said, "Your sister has it." When I asked to call a friend, Lorraine cut in smoothly. "Not while he's unstable." Even the doctor seemed blind to it. He came in during the afternoon, clipboard in hand, his white coat bright under the sterile lights. He barely glanced at me before speaking directly to her. "We'll keep him for a few more days. Observation, blood work, adjustments as needed." Lorraine's hand brushed my arm and she said, "I'll make sure he complies," I shouted. "I don't need to stay, I walked in here fine." But the doctor only wrote something down, muttering, "Agitation persists." It was like being erased in real time. That evening a tray of food arrived. Mushy vegetables, a carton of milk, tasteless pudding. I pushed it away. Minutes later, Lorraine returned with another pill cup. "I said no," I told her. She set the cup down on the tray. "Babies always fight their medicine at first." The nurse laughed lightly at her joke, but my blood ran cold. Lorraine lifted the cup herself, pressing it toward my lips. The nurse stood by, not interfering, not questioning. Like this was routine. I knocked it away, the pills scattering across the sheet. Oh, for a moment I felt like I'd won. But then the nurse silently produced another cup from her pocket. 2 more pills. "Try again," Lorraine said, her smile fixed, her eyes sharp as glass. Later that night, I made my first attempt. The hallway beyond my room was quiet, only the squeak of rubber soles now and then. I slid the IV needle out, grimacing as blood welled at the puncture. My body screamed to lie back down, but I staggered toward the door anyway. The second I touched the handle, the alarm on the IV monitor shrieked. She was already there. Lorraine stepped from the shadows of the hall, hands folded neatly in front of her, eyes shining in the low light. Not shocked, not panicked, almost satisfied. "You'll only hurt yourself, Curtis," she said calmly. She pressed the call button, and 2 nurses rushed in with fresh supplies. They didn't scold me. They didn't ask questions. They just worked quickly, like they'd expected this. As the new IV slid into my arm, Lorraine leaned close, brushing my hair back from my forehead. "You can't even trust your own body anymore." she whispered. But you can trust me. That night I lay staring at the bracelet, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My name printed in bold letters. Her name beneath it, defining me, owning me. It hit me then. I wasn't here to heal. I was here because she wanted me trapped. And now everyone in this building believed she was the one saving me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time my eyelids sagged, I'd snap awake, convinced Lorraine was standing there in the dark. By morning, the fluorescent lights felt like interrogation lamps. A nurse came in to take my vitals. She smiled warmly but didn't look me in the eye. Her questions were directed to Lorraine, who had somehow appeared in the room before I even noticed the door open. "Has he been eating?" the nurse asked. "Not much," Lorraine answered smoothly, tucking the blanket tighter around me. "But that's normal. He's always been picky." The nurse chuckled as if it were a sweet anecdote. My blood boiled. "I'm sitting right here," I snapped. But the nurse only wrote something in the chart. Paranoid, combative. Later that day, I heard the low murmur of voices outside my room. Doctors, Lorraine. Their words floated in and out. Longer-term care. Compliance issues. Recommend psych hold. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. When Lorraine walked back in, I demanded answers. "What did you tell them?" She sat in the chair by the window, crossing her legs delicately. "That you need help. Real help. Not just a few days. You can't manage on your own anymore, Curtis." And they listened. My stomach dropped. "You're lying." She smiled faintly. "Check the bracelet." I looked down. Same white band. Same bold letters. Guardian, Lorraine Hart. That night a man in a gray suit visited. Not a doctor, not a nurse. He carried a folder, spoke softly, and laid papers on the tray in front of me. "Your sister has petitioned for your continued care," he explained. "Just a routine transfer to a longer-term facility. Nothing to worry about." I shoved the folder back. "I didn't agree to this." Lorraine stood behind him, resting her hands on my shoulders like a puppeteer. "He's frightened," she told the man. "He doesn't understand what's best for him." The man nodded sympathetically. To her, not to me. "It's common. We'll make the transition easy." My chest constricted. Transition, facility, words that sounded permanent. That evening I tried one last time. When the nurse brought my dinner, I hurled the tray across the room and bolted for the door. I made it halfway down the hall before an orderly tackled me to the tile. I shouted until my throat tore, but the only person who came running was Lorraine. She crouched beside me, calm as ever, brushing hair from my sweat-soaked face. "See how dangerous you are to yourself?" she murmured, loud enough for the staff to hear. This is why I had to step in. The orderly hauled me back to bed, strapping my wrists loosely to the rails. Lorraine kissed my forehead before leaving. "Rest," she said. "Tomorrow, we'll get you settled in your new home." The next morning, a van waited outside. I saw it through the window as they wheeled me down the hall. It wasn't an ambulance. No flashing lights. Just an unmarked transport with tinted windows. Lorraine walked beside the stretcher, clutching a clipboard. She signed forms quickly, efficiently, like she'd done it 100 times. Every staff member smiled at her, thanked her for her dedication, praised her for being such a good sister. I screamed until my lungs burned. Not one person looked twice. As they loaded me into the van, Lorraine leaned down, her lips close to my ear. "You're safe now, Curtis," she whispered. "You'll never be alone again." The doors slammed shut, sealing me in darkness. The engine rumbled to life. And that was the last time I saw the hospital. When my parents passed, I didn't expect to set foot in that house again. I'd built a life away from it, away from my sister Marjorie, who had chosen to stay behind. The will was simple. The house went to her. I got a small share of money. That was fine by me. I didn't want the creaking walls or the sagging porch steps or the shadows that clung to that place like mold. But this spring, Marjorie called and asked me to visit. She said it was time we finally went through the family belongings together, sorted out what mattered and what didn't. Closure, she called it. I almost said no, but something in her voice made me think refusing would only make things worse. The house smelled the same the second I walked in, lemon polish mixed with the faint sour bite of mildew. The kitchen was spotless, gleaming, every counter scrubbed. The living room looked staged, like a museum exhibit. Even the picture frames were dusted and perfectly aligned. Too perfect. We drank tea at the kitchen table, and I tried to make small talk, but my eyes kept wandering toward the basement door. It was painted shut when we were kids. Always damp, always dark. Marjorie never wanted to go down there alone, terrified of spiders and shadows. Now she acted like it didn't exist. So of course I asked, "Have you cleaned the basement?" Her teacup clinked loudly as she set it down. "Don't worry about that," she said flatly. "That part of the house is mine." Her eyes didn't leave mine until I looked away. That night, after she went to bed, I couldn't shake the curiosity. The hallway creaked under my feet as I made my way to that old basement door. To my surprise, the paint seal was gone. A brand new deadbolt glimmered under the dim bulb. She had unlocked it earlier, and I hadn't even noticed. The stairs groaned as I descended into the dark. The air was thick, almost syrupy, the smell of dust and old paper hitting the back of my throat. I expected boxes, broken furniture, maybe Dad's old tools, but no. Filing cabinets, dozens of them. Heavy gray, lined up neatly along the concrete walls like an archive. Each one was labeled in black marker. My stomach dropped as I read the words stenciled on the drawers. Darren, school. Darren, friends. Darren, jobs. My hands shook as I opened the first drawer. Inside were folders, manila neatly stacked, filled with my report cards, old essays, detention slips, not copies, originals, even the ones I swore I had thrown away. Another drawer. Photographs. Me at prom. Me with my first girlfriend. Me on my college campus. Some were candid shots I'd never seen before, taken from angles that suggested she'd been there, watching. Then I found the thickest folder yet, labeled in bold. Darren, medical. Inside were copies of prescriptions, notes from doctors, appointment summaries. Words like anxiety, unstable, compulsive tendencies were circled in red pen. Some files were from clinics I barely remembered visiting. Yet here they were, cataloged, archived. Every weakness, every crack in my life laid bare. I kept digging. Another folder stopped me cold. Printed emails, my emails, with arguments from past girlfriends, apologies to bosses, messages I never thought anyone else had seen. They were highlighted, annotated in the margins in Marjorie's neat handwriting. Words like failure, weak, unfit. And then I saw the thick envelope at the bottom of the drawer, labeled in block letters, Darren, future. I hesitated. My pulse thundered in my ears as I tore it open. Inside was a single page, my obituary, my full name, date of birth, and a death date left blank. Beneath it, a draft eulogy written in her handwriting. Darren Vale lived a troubled life, but he found peace at last thanks to the care and protection of his devoted sister Marjorie. The basement light above me buzzed and flickered, and from the top of the stairs, her voice floated down, calm and steady. I told you that basement was mine. I froze at the bottom of the stairs, obituary trembling in my hand. Marjorie's silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the hall light. She didn't shout, didn't rush. She simply descended one step at a time, her heels clicking against the wood like a metronome. "Do you see now?" she asked softly. "You were never capable of carrying your own story. I had to take care of it for you." Her calmness made my skin crawl worse than if she had screamed. I backed into the nearest cabinet, the folders inside rattling. You've been spying on me, I stammered. Stalking me. Why would you do this? She reached the concrete floor, her hand trailing along the cabinets like a curator. Because you never remembered the details, Darren. You never valued the truth. Someone had to write the record. Someone had to keep you consistent. I shook my head. This isn't truth. This is obsession. She smiled faintly. Truth is what survives. Marjorie opened another cabinet drawer, this one labeled Darren, Relationships. She pulled a folder and let the papers flutter to the ground. Photos of me with girlfriends, notes about fights, bank statements from shared apartments. On one photo, her handwriting curved across the bottom margin. She will leave him by September. She always would. I felt sick. You don't get to decide my life. But I already have, she said. She reached into her pocket and produced a small tape recorder, an old handheld one. She pressed play. My voice filled the basement. My voice shaky and pleading, from a phone call years ago after a breakup. She had recorded it. All of it. See? She whispered. Even your pain belongs to me. I lunged for the stairs, but she was faster than I remembered. She slammed the basement door shut above us, twisting the lock with a deliberate click. I was trapped. Sit, she ordered, pointing at the concrete floor. I didn't. I couldn't. My chest was heaving, eyes darting for anything to fight with. Her tone sharpened. Sit. And to my horror, I did. My body folded like a scolded child, trained by years of her dominance. She knelt across from me and slid a fresh folder from the future envelope. Inside was a set of forms, psychiatric evaluations, medical recommendations, even a petition for long-term care. All pre-signed, my name forged. Her name written neatly in the Guardian box. They'll believe it, she said gently. They'll always believe me. I've got every record to prove you unstable, every paper trail, every photograph. By the time I'm finished, Darren Vale will no longer exist. He'll just be my story. Tears stung my eyes. You can't erase me. Marjorie leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. You already let me. I don't remember how long we sat there, maybe minutes, maybe hours. The light overhead flickered, the hum of the refrigerator upstairs the only reminder of time moving. Finally, she stood, smoothing her skirt. She slid the obituary back into its envelope, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the stairs. Get some rest, she said over her shoulder. Tomorrow we'll start drafting your ending properly. The lock clicked shut above me. The basement went black. And in that silence, surrounded by cabinets filled with every secret, every failure, every stolen memory of my life, I realized something that broke me more than anything else. She wasn't just writing my history. She was convincing me it was true.